In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where stars burned cold and planets floated like frozen jewels in the void, there existed a realm known as Cryar. It was a world encased in ice, its surface glittering with crystalline structures that refracted light into dazzling rainbows even under the dim glow of its distant sun. The air itself seemed to shimmer with frost, each breath visible as delicate clouds that dissipated into nothingness. This was no ordinary planet. It was a kingdom ruled by an alien queen whose beauty was as chilling as it was mesmerizing. Her name carried whispers across star systems. Queen Lysara. She was tall and statuesque, her skin pale blue and smooth like polished sapphire, etched with intricate patterns of silver veins that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent energy. Her eyes glowed with an inner fire, twin orbs of icy white that pierced through the soul of anyone who dared meet her gaze. Her hair cascaded down her back in waves of translucent strands, resembling frozen waterfalls caught mid-flow. Around her neck hung a pendant made from pure cryonite, a rare mineral found only on Cryar, said to amplify her already formidable powers over ice and cold. Lysara's rule was absolute, her authority unquestioned among her people, the Cryovians, beings adapted to survive the harshest winters imaginable. They revered her not just for her regal bearing but also for her unmatched mastery of combat. With a single wave of her hand, she could summon walls of razor-sharp icicles or freeze entire armies in place. Yet, despite her strength, she harbored a deep-seated disdain for other species, particularly humans. To her, they were fragile creatures, their bodies ill-suited for survival in extreme environments, their emotions volatile and unpredictable. She saw them as little more than pests, unworthy of respect or acknowledgement. This prejudice had been reinforced countless times throughout history. Whenever human explorers ventured too close to Cryar, they inevitably faltered, succumbing to the biting cold, losing themselves in panic when faced with danger, or simply proving incapable of matching the discipline and resilience of the Cryovians. Each failure only served to deepen Lysara's contempt. Humans were weak, she believed, and their presence in the cosmos was a blight best ignored. But fate has a way of unraveling even the most steadfast convictions. It began on a day much like any other, though perhaps colder than usual. A lone spacecraft breached the atmosphere of Cryar, its hull battered and scarred from what appeared to be a desperate escape. The ship crash-landed near the outskirts of the capital city, sending tremors rippling through the frozen ground. Curiosity piqued, Lysara descended from her palace atop a glacier, flanked by her elite guard of frost-wielding warriors. As she approached the wreckage, tendrils of mist swirled around her feet, parting like curtains before her commanding presence. The hatch of the ship groaned open, revealing a figure clad in tattered armor streaked with soot and blood. He staggered out, his movements slow but deliberate, every step betraying both exhaustion and determination. His face was obscured beneath a cracked visor, but his posture spoke volumes. This was no ordinary human. Even as he collapsed onto one knee, gasping for breath in the thin, frigid air, there was something about him that commanded attention. Something different. Lysara tilted her head slightly, studying him with a mixture of disdain and intrigue. "You dare trespass upon my domain?" she asked, her voice melodic yet edged with frost. "Do you not know how easily I could end your pitiful existence?" The man raised his head slowly, meeting her piercing gaze without flinching. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the howling wind. Then, with effort, he pushed himself to his full height, standing tall despite the obvious toll his journey had taken. His voice, rough and gravelly, cut through the chill. "I didn't come here to die," he said, his words measured and steady. "I came here to fight." A ripple of murmurs spread through the ranks of the Cryovian guards. Fight? Against her? The very notion bordered on sacrilege. Yet Lysara found herself intrigued rather than offended. There was a quiet confidence in this human's tone, a resolve that defied logic given his current state. Most would have begged for mercy, pleaded for sanctuary, or at least shown fear. But not him. "Very well," she replied coolly, a faint smirk playing at the corners of her lips. "If it is a fight you seek, then a fight you shall have. But know this. Should you fail, your death will serve as a reminder to all others who dare cross into my realm." With a flick of her wrist, she summoned a blade forged entirely of ice, its edges gleaming dangerously in the dim light. "Choose your weapon, human. Or are you too weak to wield one?" To everyone's astonishment, the man reached behind his back and drew a sword unlike anything they had ever seen. Its hilt was wrapped in worn leather, its blade scorched black as if tempered in the heart of a dying star. Despite its crude appearance, it radiated an aura of power that made even the seasoned Cryovian warriors uneasy. Without hesitation, he assumed a fighting stance, his body coiled like a spring, ready to strike. And so, amidst the endless expanse of snow and ice, a battle unfolded that would echo through the ages. The first clash sent shockwaves rippling outward, the force of their collision shaking loose shards of ice from nearby glaciers. Lysara moved with grace and precision, her every strike calculated to exploit any perceived weakness. She unleashed torrents of freezing winds, attempting to overwhelm him with sheer elemental might. Yet the human warrior stood firm, his footing unshaken even as frost crept up his boots and threatened to immobilize him. Each swing of his darkened blade carved arcs of heat through the air, melting the icy projectiles before they could reach him. What struck Lysara most was not merely his physical prowess but the way he adapted to her attacks. When she conjured jagged spears of ice to impale him, he twisted and dodged with uncanny agility, using the terrain to his advantage. When she froze the ground beneath his feet to hinder his movement, he responded by leaping onto floating chunks of debris, turning her own battlefield against her. His swordsmanship was unlike anything she had encountered, a blend of raw power and tactical ingenuity that left her momentarily off balance. For the first time in centuries, doubt flickered in Lysara's mind. This human was no mere soldier. He fought with the instincts of a predator, anticipating her moves almost before she made them. Every blow he landed against her defenses reverberated through her core, forcing her to summon greater reserves of energy to counter him. The crowd of Cryovian warriors watched in stunned silence, their queen locked in a duel that showed no signs of ending quickly. As the battle raged on, Lysara began to notice subtle details about her opponent. His breathing remained controlled despite the exertion, suggesting years of rigorous training. His eyes, now fully visible after his visor cracked further during the fight, burned with a fierce intensity that mirrored her own. And yet, there was something else, a flicker of sorrow buried deep within those stormy depths, hinting at a past marred by loss and hardship. It was this complexity, this undeniable humanity, that unsettled her more than his skill. With a growl of frustration, Lysara unleashed a devastating flurry of attacks, her ice blade slicing through the air with lethal speed. But the human warrior met her assault head-on, parrying each strike with a ferocity that matched hers. Sparks flew as metal clashed against ice, the sound echoing like thunder across the frozen plains. Finally, with a roar, he drove her back with a powerful overhead swing, shattering her weapon into 1,000 glittering fragments. Breathing heavily, Lysara stepped away, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She stared at the man before her, her expression unreadable. Never before had anyone forced her to retreat, not once, not ever. Her pride stung, but beneath it lay a burgeoning curiosity. Who was this human, and how had he become so formidable? Before she could speak, the warrior lowered his sword slightly, though he did not relax his guard. "You're strong," he admitted gruffly, his voice tinged with reluctant respect. "Stronger than anyone I've faced. But strength isn't everything." Lysara arched an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. "Oh, enlighten me, then. What else matters?" He hesitated, as if weighing his next words carefully. Then, with a grim smile, he said, "Will. Determination. The refusal to give up, no matter the odds. That's what makes someone truly dangerous." The words lingered in the frigid air, resonating far beyond their immediate context. For Lysara, they struck a chord deep within her, a challenge not just to her abilities but to her beliefs. Could it be possible that she had misjudged humans? That beneath their apparent fragility lay a resilience she had never considered? Unwilling to concede outright, she straightened her posture and regarded him with renewed interest. "You intrigue me, human," she said finally, her tone softer but still laced with caution. "Tell me, who are you, and why have you come to Cryar?" His grip tightened slightly on the hilt of his sword, and for a moment, it seemed as though he might refuse to answer. But then, with a sigh, he relaxed his stance and met her gaze squarely. "My name is Kale," he said. "And I came here because I heard rumors of a queen who thought herself invincible. I wanted to prove her wrong." A murmur rippled through the assembled Cryovians, some awestruck by his audacity, others outraged by his boldness. Yet Lysara found herself smiling, a small, enigmatic curve of her lips that hinted at amusement rather than anger. "You've certainly succeeded in capturing my attention," she said. "But tell me, Kale, what drives a man like you? What fuels this unyielding spirit of yours?" Kale hesitated again, his jaw tightening as if wrestling with memories better left buried. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that silenced even the wind. "Loss," he said simply. "Betrayal. Pain. Things that would break most people. But instead of breaking me, they forged me into something stronger. Something sharper." Lysara studied him intently, her glowing eyes searching for any trace of deception. But all she saw was truth, a raw, unvarnished honesty that compelled her to listen further. "Go on," she urged, her curiosity growing with each passing second. And so, Kale began to recount his tale, a story of war and survival, of betrayal by those he once called allies, and of a relentless pursuit of redemption. As he spoke, the icy landscape around them seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the vivid imagery of his words. He described battles fought on scorched earth, comrades lost to treachery, and a vow made under a blood-red sky to never let weakness define him again. His journey had brought him to the edge of despair, yet it had also honed him into the warrior standing before her now. By the time he finished, the temperature seemed to drop even further, though whether from the environment or the gravity of his words was unclear. Lysara stood motionless, her thoughts swirling like a winter storm. Here was a being who embodied everything she had dismissed in humans: resilience, adaptability, and an indomitable will to endure. How could she reconcile this revelation with her long-held beliefs? "You are extraordinary," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not because of your strength, but because of your spirit. Few possess such conviction." Kale inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her words but offering no reply. Instead, he waited, sensing that the true test of this encounter was far from over. After a prolonged silence, Lysara turned to address her guards. "Leave us," she commanded, her tone brooking no argument. The Cryovians exchanged uncertain glances but obeyed without question, retreating until only she and Kale remained amidst the desolate expanse. When they were alone, Lysara took a step closer to him, her expression thoughtful. "You've proven yourself worthy of my attention, Kale. But tell me, why do you care what I think of your kind? Why risk your life to change the opinion of someone who views you as inferior?" Kale's grip tightened imperceptibly on his sword, though his stance remained relaxed. "Because perceptions shape actions," he replied evenly. "If you see humans as weak, then others will follow your lead. And when that happens, we're treated as expendable, tools to be used and discarded. I won't stand for that. Not anymore." His response stirred something within Lysara, a flicker of unease mingled with admiration. She had always prided herself on her ability to judge others accurately, to discern strength from weakness with unerring precision. Yet here stood a human who defied every preconception she held, challenging not just her assumptions but the very foundation of her worldview. "I must admit," she said after a pause, "you've given me much to consider. Perhaps I have underestimated your species. But tell me this, what would you have me do? Change centuries of belief overnight? Abandon my duty to protect my people based solely on the actions of one individual?" Kale shook his head. "I'm not asking for miracles or blind trust. All I want is for you to see us for who we really are, not as weaklings to be dismissed, but as survivors. We may not have your gifts, your resilience to the cold, or your mastery over ice, but we adapt. We overcome. And sometimes, we surprise even ourselves." Lysara's gaze softened, though only slightly. There was wisdom in his words, a truth that resonated deeply despite her initial resistance. Still, she was a queen bound by tradition and responsibility. Changing her stance toward humans would require more than just personal conviction. It would demand proof that such a shift was warranted. "Very well," she said finally, her voice carrying a note of finality. "You've earned my respect, Kale, and perhaps even a measure of trust. But if you wish to change my mind, and the minds of my people, you'll need to demonstrate that your strength extends beyond the battlefield. Strength of character, leadership, unity. These are qualities that cannot be forged in combat alone. Kale nodded, understanding the challenge implicit in her words. Then show me what you need to see, he said. I won't shy away from it. A faint smile touched Lysara's lips, though it was tinged with skepticism. So be it. Follow me. With that, she turned and began walking toward her palace, her strides purposeful and unhurried. Kale fell into step beside her, his presence commanding despite his weary appearance. As they traversed the frozen landscape, Lysara found herself stealing glances at him, her thoughts a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she admired his courage and tenacity, qualities she valued above all else. On the other, she couldn't ignore the implications of what accepting him might mean for her reign. If she acknowledged humans as equals, it could undermine her authority among the Cryovians, many of whom shared her former disdain for outsiders. Yet, as they approached the towering spires of her palace, Lysara realized something unsettling. She no longer cared as much about maintaining appearances. For the first time in centuries, she felt alive, truly alive, in a way that transcended her role as queen. This human, this enigmatic warrior, had ignited a spark within her that refused to be extinguished. Inside the palace, the air was warmer but no less imposing. Crystalline chandeliers cast prismatic light across the grand hall, illuminating murals depicting Cryovian triumphs over adversaries. Kale's boots echoed against the polished floor as he followed Lysara deeper into the heart of her domain. They passed rows of guards who watched him with wary eyes, their loyalty to their queen evident in their rigid postures. Finally, they arrived at a chamber unlike any other, a circular room lined with shelves filled with ancient scrolls and artifacts. At its center stood a pedestal holding a glowing orb, pulsating with a soft, ethereal light. Lysara approached it reverently, her fingers brushing its surface as if drawing strength from its presence. This is the heart of Cryar, she explained, turning to face Kale. It contains the collective knowledge and history of my people. If you truly wish to understand us, and if you hope to earn our trust, you must delve into it. Only then can you grasp what it means to be Cryovian. Kale stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the orb. And if I succeed? Lysara's expression hardened, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. If you succeed, she said quietly, then perhaps we can forge a new path, one where humans and Cryovians stand as equals. But know this, failure will not be tolerated. Without hesitation, Kale placed his hand on the orb, feeling its warmth seep into his palm. The moment their connection was established, visions flooded his mind, images of battles fought, sacrifices made, and bonds forged in the crucible of adversity. He saw the Cryovians not as conquerors, but as survivors, their strength born not from arrogance but necessity. As the visions continued, Lysara watched him closely, her heart pounding in anticipation. Whatever happened next would alter the course of both their lives, and possibly the fate of two species. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as Kale remained motionless, his hand resting on the heart of Cryar. The orb pulsed rhythmically, its light shifting hues with each passing moment, as if responding to the depth of his connection. Lysara observed silently, her glowing eyes tracing every nuance of his expression. His brow furrowed in concentration, his jaw clenched tightly, and yet there was an undeniable calmness about him, a steadiness that suggested he was absorbing far more than mere information. He wasn't just witnessing the history of the Cryovians, he was living it. The visions unfolding within his mind painted a tapestry of survival and resilience. He saw the earliest days of Cryar, when the planet was a barren wasteland devoid of life, save for the hardiest microorganisms clinging to existence in subterranean ice caves. Over millennia, these organisms evolved into sentient beings capable of manipulating their harsh environment, shaping it to sustain them. Their society grew not through conquest but necessity, each advancement born from the collective will to endure. He witnessed the forging of alliances between tribes, the creation of tools and weapons designed to withstand the unrelenting cold, and the rituals that bound them together as a people. But it wasn't all triumph. Kale also saw the scars of their struggles, the wars fought against invaders who sought to plunder Cryovar's resources, the plagues that swept through their cities, and the internal strife that nearly tore their civilization apart. Through it all, the Cryovians persevered, their unity forged in fire and ice. It was this shared legacy of hardship that defined them, shaping their culture and their queen. As the torrent of images slowed, Kale's thoughts turned inward. He realized that the Cryovians' disdain for outsiders stemmed not from arrogance but from a deeply ingrained fear of vulnerability. Their survival had always depended on self-reliance, and trusting others, even those who claimed goodwill, felt like an unacceptable risk. To them, humans represented unpredictability, chaos, and fragility, qualities antithetical to their way of life. When Kale finally withdrew his hand from the orb, the room fell silent except for the faint hum of residual energy. His eyes, sharp and focused, met Lysara's, and for the first time, she saw genuine understanding reflected in his gaze. "You've endured more than I imagined," he said softly, his voice heavy with empathy. "Your strength isn't just in your power over ice, it's in your ability to endure, to rebuild, to protect what matters most." Lysara blinked, momentarily taken aback by the sincerity in his words. No one had ever spoken to her like this, not as a ruler, but as a person. The weight of her responsibilities often isolated her, leaving little room for vulnerability. Yet here stood a human who not only understood her people's pain but respected it. "And what of your kind?" she asked, her tone softer than before. "What does this knowledge reveal to you about yourselves?" Kale hesitated, his gaze dropping briefly to the floor before returning to hers. "That we're not so different," he admitted. "Humans may lack your natural resilience to the cold, but we share the same drive to survive, to adapt. Our weaknesses make us resourceful. Our fears push us to innovate. And our capacity for compassion. That's what keeps us going when everything else fails." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, charged with the potential for change. Lysara stepped closer, her movements deliberate yet hesitant, as if unsure how to proceed. "You've proven yourself more than just a warrior, Kale," she said finally. "You've shown insight, humility, and a willingness to learn. These are traits I value above all else." Her words hung in the air, pregnant with meaning. Kale straightened, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Does this mean you're willing to reconsider your stance on humans?" Lysara's expression shifted, her features softening ever so slightly. "It means I am open to the possibility," she replied. "But trust is not given lightly among my people. You've taken the first step, but there is still much work to be done." Before Kale could respond, a sudden commotion erupted outside the chamber. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the halls, followed by the unmistakable clang of weapons being drawn. Lysara's demeanor changed instantly, her regal composure giving way to alert readiness. She strode toward the entrance, her guards rushing to flank her. "What's happening?" Kale demanded, following close behind. "A threat," Lysara said tersely, her voice cutting through the chaos. "One that requires immediate action." Moments later, they emerged into the grand hall to find it filled with Cryovian warriors, their weapons poised and their expressions grim. At the center of the room stood a group of intruders, humans clad in sleek, high-tech armor, their faces obscured by helmets equipped with visors. Unlike Kale, these newcomers radiated hostility, their weapons trained on the assembled Cryovians. Lysara's eyes narrowed as she addressed them. "Who dares invade my palace?" One of the figures stepped forward, removing their helmet to reveal a face marked by arrogance and malice. "Queen Lysara," the man sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "We've come to claim what is rightfully ours. Your precious cryonite will fund our empire's expansion, and there's nothing you can do to stop us." The tension in the room became palpable, the air thick with the promise of violence. Lysara raised her hand, signaling her warriors to hold their positions. Then, without warning, she turned to Kale, her gaze piercing. "This is your chance to prove yourself once more," she said. "Will you stand with us, or against us?" Kale's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword, his jaw tightening as he surveyed the scene. The choice before him was clear, yet fraught with consequence. Whatever decision he made would define not only his future but the fragile bridge he had begun to build between humans and Cryovians. Kale's grip tightened on his sword as he stepped forward, positioning himself between the intruders and Lysara. His voice rang out, steady and resolute. "I stand with Cryar," he declared, his eyes locking onto the leader of the invaders. "And I'll fight anyone who threatens it." The human commander sneered, clearly unimpressed. You're a fool, Kale. You've thrown your lot in with these ice-wielding aliens? They see you as nothing more than vermin, just like us. Lysara's icy glare silenced the man mid-sentence. Enough, she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Your kind has no place here. Leave now, or face the consequences. The invaders hesitated, their confidence wavering under the combined presence of the queen and the warrior who had earned her trust. But arrogance won out, and the commander gave the order to attack. Chaos erupted as energy blasts and shards of ice filled the air. Kale moved with precision, his darkened blade slicing through the invaders' weapons and armor. Each strike was calculated, conserving his strength while exploiting their overconfidence. Beside him, Lysara unleashed torrents of frost, freezing enemies in place and shattering them with a flick of her wrist. Together, they formed an unstoppable duo, their movements synchronized despite having fought together for only moments. As the battle raged, Kale noticed something troubling. The invaders weren't just after cryonite. Hidden among their ranks were devices designed to destabilize Cryavar's core, threatening to collapse the entire planet. Realizing the stakes, he shouted to Lysara, "They're trying to destroy Cryar. We need to stop them before it's too late." Without hesitation, Lysara nodded and summoned a massive wall of ice to block the invaders' advance. "Go," she ordered. "I'll hold them off. Protect our world." Kale didn't argue. Trusting her abilities, he sprinted toward the heart of the palace, where the invaders' sabotage devices were being activated. Along the way, he encountered resistance but cut through it with relentless determination. When he reached the chamber housing Cryavar's core, he found the leader planting the final explosive charge. "You're too late," the man gloated, pressing the detonator. But Kale was faster. With a roar, he lunged forward, knocking the device from the man's hand and engaging him in close combat. The fight was brutal and unforgiving, but Kale's resolve never wavered. Finally, with a decisive blow, he disarmed the leader and disabled the explosives, saving Cryar from destruction. By the time he returned to the Grand Hall, the remaining invaders had been subdued. Lysara stood amidst her warriors, her expression one of quiet pride as she watched Kale approach. Though battered and bloodied, he carried himself with dignity, his mission accomplished. "You've done more than prove yourself today," Lysara said, her voice carrying both gratitude and admiration. "You've shown my people, and myself, that humans are capable of greatness, of honor, of sacrifice." Kale bowed his head slightly, acknowledging her words. "It wasn't just me. We did this together. Humans and Cryovians." Lysara smiled, a rare and genuine expression that transformed her icy beauty into something warmer. "Then let this be the beginning of a new era," she declared, turning to address her people. "An alliance between our species, built on mutual respect and shared purpose." Cheers erupted from the Cryovians, their skepticism replaced by hope. For the first time, the barriers between them began to crumble, replaced by the promise of unity. As Kale stood beside Lysara, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known was possible. He had come to Cryar seeking to challenge prejudice, but he had found something far greater, a chance to bridge worlds and forge a future where differences became strengths rather than divisions. And so, beneath the shimmering skies of Cryar, a fragile yet powerful bond was forged, a testament to the resilience of two species determined to rise above their pasts and embrace a brighter tomorrow. As the cheers of the Cryovians echoed through the Grand Hall, Lysara turned to Kale, her glowing eyes soft with gratitude. "You have given us a gift beyond measure," she said. "A reason to hope." Kale met her gaze, his voice steady but humble. "Hope isn't mine to give. It's something we create together." Lysara nodded, then raised her hand, summoning a shimmering projection of Cryavar's icy expanse. "From this day forward, let our worlds stand united. Let this alliance be a beacon for others." The Cryovians roared their approval, their frost-laden breaths mingling with the warmth of newfound trust. Kale felt a pang of pride, not for himself, but for the future they had secured. "Will you stay?" Lysara asked quietly, her tone betraying a vulnerability she rarely showed. "To help guide this new path?" Kale hesitated, glancing at the warriors and citizens now looking to him as an equal. "For now," he replied. "But my journey is far from over. She smiled faintly, understanding in her eyes. "Then we will walk it together, for as long as fate allows." With that, the queen extended her hand, and Kale clasped it firmly. The gesture symbolized more than peace. It marked the birth of unity between two species once divided by mistrust. Outside, the frozen plains of Cryar sparkled under the dim light of its distant sun, reflecting the promise of renewal. The winds carried whispers of change, echoing across galaxies. And so, beneath the endless ice and stars, a warrior and a queen stood side by side, their bond unbreakable, a testament to the power of courage, understanding, and shared purpose. Together, they had defied prejudice and fear, proving that even the coldest hearts could thaw when touched by the fire of determination. Their story would be told for generations, not as one of conquest, but of connection, a reminder that strength lies not in division, but in unity. As the first rays of dawn broke over Cryavar's horizon, Kale and Lysara stepped onto the palace balcony, greeted by the cheers of a united people.